I am not me. The attic air held the taste of cardboard and old glue, and the kind of dust that shows you the age of its stickiness when it clings to your skin. It was hotter than it had any right to be, even with the season still thinking about spring. Insulation lay in soft yellow dunes between the rafters. A hornet husk sat in one corner like a punched paper lantern. My head bumped a nail that came through the roof deck in a tidy circle, each nail a small habit, each drip a possibility. I hadn't meant to be up there long. I told myself I was just putting off the lawn, that I'd come up to sort what should have gone to the dump when we first moved back in, which was 3 months after Mom called me in the night and told me Dad wasn't breathing right. I told myself all kinds of things, most of them about small chores. The trunk I was kneeling at had belonged to them before it belonged to me. I knew the pock of its brass latches by sound. If you shut it hard, one of them would bounce and bite back open as if what was inside had air of its own. I coughed, and something in my chest whistled like a thin straw in a milkshake you were almost done with. I lifted out framed photos that never hung a nest of cords for phones and cameras that had gone out of style one by one like haircuts, a stack of old schoolwork with my name on some of it, my sister's on the rest. She lived an hour away and had a new baby and said she meant to come help, but had a way of taking the couch and falling asleep in our family. What made me stop was a book I recognized until I didn't. I'd had a diary when I was a kid, the kind with a lock you could open with a fork tine. It was blue and scuffed, and when I found it 4 summers ago during a garage purge, I'd read 3 lines that made me feel stupid and sweet, and I'd thrown it away. The book in my hands now was blue, but not that blue. Its cover was the color of a lake that looks warm and isn't. The corners were barely bumped. When I slid my thumb on the edge, the paper gave, not the way old paper gives, that crisp surrender, but like something you could still crease without breaking. Mine, I thought. And then not mine, when the cover had no little gilt lock spot, no sticker I remembered, no pen scratch on the inside board where I'd tried to draw a motorcycle and ended up with circles. Still, when I opened it, the sloppy M at the top left corner of the first page looked like my handwriting before I taught my hand to behave at the parts counter. Mikey's, with the apostrophe floating higher than it should, like a balloon that got loose, but not entirely. Under it, in neat block letters I didn't recognize, was the date. Yesterday's date. The entry was nothing much. That was exactly the wrong way to put it. It was about nothing much. My morning toast a shade darker than I like. The flick on the toaster slider failing to land where I meant it. The way the second piece always burns a little more because the guts are already hot. Lines about the kitchen light flickering for a breath, even though I replaced the tube 2 weeks ago. I read it and felt like someone had been standing in my kitchen with their hands in their pockets, watching the quick, stupid things you never tell anyone because they don't matter. I looked around me like I'd hear boots on the joists. The attic was only the attic. A cobweb made a harp in a corner. A truck hissed at the four-way a street over, brakes sighing. The smell of old paper got heavy again. I turned the page because that was the thing to do. Today's date. The handwriting was still mine, which made something behind my ribs go tight because I know how I make my why. How the tail of it wants to curl back like a cat. How my T can decide if it wants the bar to lean or be soldier straight. It was my hand, and not my hand. The entry said I'd get into a back and forth with Troy about the ladder money he still owed me from when we painted his aunt's carport. It said we'd to take it to the parking lot so Kincaid wouldn't hear the heat of it from inside the hardware store. It said I'd tell him it wasn't about the dollars, which would be a lie even though it would also be true. There were 5 other sentences. One of them said Mom would rub her temples at dinner and say she had a headache that felt like her head had a slow hinge. I read the words about a second time, getting hung up on the slow hinge, liking how it sounded and hating that it sounded like something I could have come up with. The page had a smear in the same place I always got a smear, where my hand rested. That was when the cold trickled along my shoulders like someone dragged a key above my shirt, and I turned another page because I had to. Tomorrow's date. The first line was only weather, the way you make a game out of being right about rain. Morning starts dry. By noon it comes down long and narrow. That was how it said it. Long and narrow, like the rain had geometry. It said I'd take a call just before supper, and I wouldn't make out the words at first, because the connection would make a voice like it was coming through a curtain. It said I'd stand by the sink and let the water run and run while the phone said what it said. The last line was short and colder than the rest. It said, I saw him in the mirror again tonight, the one who isn't me. I shut the book like you shut your hand in a door, on purpose and all at once, to change a kind of pain into the kind you can chart. The attic made that stuffed quiet the house makes when you were aware of every little structure holding itself up. My ears rang. The mirror, they meant, was in the far end of the attic, leaning on its own frame. It had belonged to Dad's mother. It had that bouquet of woodwork at the top and fogged silvering at the corners where it lost its grip. In this light, it held nothing but attic shapes, and me, knee down, a little hat of sweat on my head, like I'd been mowed and bagged. The book stayed in my hands because I couldn't bring myself to set it down and walk away like it was a knife I'd to leave out where anyone could grab it. I told myself I'd look again after supper, that it was a trick of memory or a prank my own neatness wanted to play on me. I went down the stairs, the book under my arm. In the kitchen, the clock made mouse steps, and the fridge let off a small exhale every few minutes. The house was used to being only Mom. It paid me no mind. I slid the book into the drawer with the folded dish towels, felt stupid for making a let's hide the evidence move, then took it out again, because what would I say when she asked me why I was hiding a notebook like a high schooler? Who would I even say wrote it? I left it on top of the fridge. No one goes there but dust. I took the lawn out of the shed and gave it the full hour. I did edges. I ran the trimmer until my hand buzzed long after I turned it off. It felt good to make a simple mess you can sweep. When I put the mower away, I stood with my hand on its handle and let the tiny engine heat back into me. The weather was exactly between. A neighbor, two back, banged something in their garage and swore once the word soft with distance. At work that afternoon, Troy did what Troy does, which is pretend not to look for me until he's close enough to be in it. We'd been boys together, both of us bad at school in different directions. He had a way of smiling when he knew he'd done a thing he shouldn't have and wanted you to help him not feel like the kind of person who would do a thing like that. He hadn't paid me what he said he would. That was a straight line between 2 points. I told myself I'd go to him and do the thing you do, which is use your nice voice to put a boundary down like it's a rug. It didn't go like that. He said it wasn't a great week, and I said I was sorry about that, and he said, I'll make you right Friday. And I said, you said that last Friday. And he said, you don't have to get sharp about it, and we were in the parking lot without meaning to be. We both put our arms out like we were talking with our bodies. He made a noise like you make when you drop something small and you hope no one saw. And I said the words the book said I'd say, it isn't tea about the dollars. It was about the dollars. It was also about what it meant when someone can leave you in limbo because they were bigger than the promise they made you. We didn't swing or shove. We're not those people. He wound down first. Okay, he said. Okay, Friday. He clapped once, the kind of clap you'd do to show the air you were done with it. I went back to the register, and the scanner beep sat in my ears as a pitch that didn't go away when I went to bed. Mum's headache was not a performance. She rubbed her temple with 2 fingers, and the skin there went pale and then pink again with each pass. I told her it was probably the weather starting to think about changing. The thing that felt like the hinge was the thing the book had given me. It wasn't a migraine. Those used to wipe her and make her go into a black room with a cool cloth. This was a pressure I recognized from when Dad didn't use the vent over the stove. The house gathered things, steam, old carpet, heat. It gave them back slow. She said she was fine. She said she didn't want me to fuss. I ran the fan anyway, a cheap plastic thing that trembled on the counter like it had opinions. It didn't rain. The evening went on like it goes. A car on Maple dragged a muffler and made a sound like a big animal clearing its throat. I washed the plates and stood with my hands under the warm running water longer than I needed. I'd always liked the feel of it, the way it took the memory of grime off your palms. At some point the water cooled and I didn't pull my hands out or hit the handle. The book had said I'd do that, and there I was, doing it. I turned the tap off and wiped the back of my neck with my sleeve. The kitchen light hummed when the compressor kicked on, a pitch you forget you live under until you listen for it. I didn't go get the book. I used the bathroom. I took my phone into my room and lay on top of the covers. I did the thing where you scroll and don't see any of it. At 10, I told myself I was ridiculous for caring this much about a voice I wasn't too sure was mine saying a thing about a mirror. We didn't keep that mirror in the living space. We kept it exactly where it had lived for my whole life, because Mom said it would be bad luck to drag it downstairs and break it. I almost laughed when I thought that, as if there was some better luck to be found in that attic. But when I closed my eyes, I saw the frame SS carved flowers and the way silver looked at the corners, like the sky you get behind a mill when a storm is still miles out. I slept like it was an errand I was bad at. I woke up tired and stupid. Morning came with a breeze that snuck in under the kitchen window and pushed the curtain out like a soft chest. Toast went in, came out a shade darker than comfortable, went in again because you always think you can correct, came out like a scar. I scraped the top with the knife until the black made a small snow on the plate. I made coffee in the cheap machine that sighed when the last drip hit. I watched the second hand of the clock do more work than anyone asked. Outside, the sky had that look it gets here, like someone rubbed a pencil on paper over a coin. The weather station on the countertop, one of Dad's gadgets that refused to die, said the pressure was steady. I didn't believe it. Work was work. Kincaid told me the mulch delivery would hit at noon, and he wanted the pallets angled this time so you could see the color without stepping into the row. He said it like he was asking the sky to try to be a better sky. At 11, Mr. Grogan, who buys nails by the pound for reasons I don't think he even knows, said he heard the treatment plant was having a bad day. He told me I should boil water because they never warn you until you've already drunk 2 glasses. I said we had a pitcher in the fridge. He said pitchers won't save you if something slimy gets in the line. It didn't start raining until nearly 3. When it came thin and slanted and quiet. Every so often, a drop would hit the metal lip of the shopping cart bay and make a ping that sounded like a question. We stacked bags. The scanner breathed. The intercom crackled, and Kincaid's voice came through like he was talking behind wool. At home around 5, I put water on the stove. You can't boil before it boils. The knock on the door was the mail. No one knocks here unless they're reselling roof work or religion. And the flyer was one of those plain advisory sheets with 4 lines that say everything and nothing. The town had found something in the samples. They used words like out of an abundance and as a precaution. I ran the tap anyway and filled a pan I was going to boil and told myself what I felt wasn't fear, just a way to keep my hands busy while the stove did heat. The rain made straight lines on the window glass and put its little lips on the edges of the storm drain out front. The phone call came at 6:30, which is not a time that means anything, and maybe that's why it lodged the way it did. The connection came with a sound, as if someone had taken a shirt out of a dryer 5 minutes early. The voice said my name, and then it thinned until I was only picking out every other syllable. It was my sister. She was at urgent care because the baby had a fever and wouldn't settle. She said it was probably nothing and more than probably something and wanted me to tell Mom so Mom wouldn't get scared. I did the thing you do, which is say you'll drive if she needs. I stood at the sink while the water went on and went on. The pasta boiled until it rose and fell like seaweed. I could smell the gas from the burner like pennies when you've been counting them. Mum came in and put her hand on my shoulder, the same place the cold had found the day before. I took the phone off my cheek and handed it to her, and she said, "Yeah, no, and I, fine, don't fuss. Then set it down the way you set down something that's hot on the underside." She went to get the fan from the counter, where I hadn't put it yet that day. The pasta was a soft loss. We ate it anyway. That night when I brushed my teeth, the mirror over the bathroom sink gave me my face and what was behind it. A single insect bumping at the light cover. The shower curtain carve of a figure, you tell yourself, is only the curtain, the fog on the glass. If I wanted to see anything else, I'd have to say I wanted it. I didn't. I stood there with toothpaste mint going chemical on my tongue and watched my own throat move. "Okay," I whispered. It wasn't a bargain. It was more like telling both of us the rules. I didn't go up to the attic on purpose. I told myself we were out of paper towels, and that was where the extra pack lived. The stairs were the kind that tell everyone in the house what you're doing. I stepped on the edges like the edges quieter. When I reached the top, the air had the attic taste again, like a book left open. The mirror in its place. The trunk open where I'd been careless. I didn't expect to see anything because expectation is what gives a thing teeth. I saw myself all the way from my socks to the scar on my chin, where I fell on the sidewalk in 3rd grade. He moved when I moved. That would be the simplest way to break it. He lifted his hand a breath after I did, and that could be parallax or the way old glass makes everything lag. He blinked when I blinked. He frowned when I felt stupid. The difference came like a sound I almost didn't hear. When I stepped a half step to the right, I watched the kneecap I was looking at take a beat before it got the idea. I wanted to laugh at myself, and that laugh sat in my throat like something swallowed wrong. I raised my right hand, quick, like a lightning test. In the glass, the left hand went up quick. A beat later, a second motion, small, like a ghost of the first, my right hand as well, as if the mirror wasn't sure what it meant to be. I stood long enough for my feet to forget they were my feet. My scalp prickled the way you get when you stand in snow and then come in, and it all decides to hurt at once. It could have been a trick in the silvering, the way the corners gave a double. It could have been nothing. I backed down the steps careful, like I was carrying milk. I didn't sleep. Around 1, I got up and drank water in the dark kitchen. What the advisory said about boiling remained on the table like a letter you don't want. A moth tried clicking itself out of the overhead light. Somewhere outside, a transformer gave a low moo, the sound it makes before it kicks. I watched the red light of the coffee maker in the blackness and thought about turning it on and didn't tea. By morning, the town had cut the water to the far side of our block to fix whatever they were fixing. We were a lucky stripe, not because we had any quality to us, but because the lines had been laid 40 years ago in a decision that followed a map rather than fairness. The rain had rinsed everything clean and left worms on the sidewalk like commas. The news came to us through thick glass and slow announcers. Mom watched it with her hand in the bowl of cereal, like she was warming it for later. She said the headache had moved down behind her jaw. I asked if she wanted to call anyone. She said no. Her no had a new angle to it. I didn't open the book again until the afternoon. I told myself I was done with it. That was more lie than not. At lunch, I stood by the fridge and ate a piece of cold toast with my hand like an animal at a fence and said out loud, "Just to see," like saying it out loud would give it edges. Tomorrow's entry talked about work. It said the pallet jack would catch my foot. It said a small hurt blooms different when you know it's coming. It said I'd avoid the left end of the aisle after that because avoidance is a cheap bargain we always think we can afford. It said the advisory would be extended and a contractor would come to the store and ask for half-inch ball valves, like the only thing wrong with the world was stock levels. The day after had only 2 lines. The man from the mirror stands at my shoulder when I shave. He makes one face when I make another. I couldn't swallow. I turned the page. The entry after that took too many words to say not much, and I hated it for how it sounded like me when I am trying to be careful. I closed the book. I put it back on top of the fridge because I wanted to feel like I could put anything anywhere I wanted. The week braided itself around small things. The pallets came, the Jack kissed my heel and I hissed and then laughed at the hiss and then didn't T laugh after all. I avoided that end of the aisle. The avoidance grew like a vine. I found myself standing at the register because there's no vine there. Kincaid said, "You good?" without looking. I said, "I'm fine," in a voice that felt like it came with the vest. Troy brought me 60% of what he owed. He set the money down in the careful way of a person who thinks the carefulness has value. I took it and didn't count it and knew that was its own deal I was making with how dumb you can be and still get through a day. He said he'd get me the rest next week, and I said okay, and surprised myself by saying it without a disguise on the word. He asked if I was mad. I told him I wasn't anything. He made his mouth into a line like a kid in church and left. I put the money in the drawer behind the register where we keep the tail fives. At home, Mom started leaving little lights on. Bathroom light, hall light, stove light. She said it helped. She didn't say with what. The house grew a layer of buzz that made the silence between appliances feel like a drop in pressure. I swapped a bulb in the pantry and the globe made the tiniest hiss when I screwed it home. The fan in the corner developed a new noise that sounded like a coin worrying itself in someone's pocket. When you live with machinery, you get good at telling yourself stories about it. It's the bearing, it's the dust, it's the balance, it's not a voice. The mirror became a place I counted steps away from. I didn't go up there, so I didn't have to know. The book did not need me to go up there. It sat above the fridge like a humming thing. On Thursday, I gave in and turned to the next page and found a line that hit low. You can T-unknow a pattern once it S-inked. That afternoon, the power did what it does sometimes when the substation out by the dry creek gets hot under a thin cloud cover. It hiccuped. The house went quiet and then roared back to life on a lower hum, like it had decided to be smaller. Mum was in the den working a crossword with a pencil she kept sharp with a paring knife. She didn't look up when the TV cut out and came back. She just kept her hand going, like the noise outside her had nothing to do with her work. There was a sort of peace in that. I envied it and spooked at it at the same time. I started waking at the same point every night without checking the clock. I refused to check the clock because if I knew the number, it would be the number I lived under. It could have been 2:20. It could have been 3:15. It almost doesn't matter. The wake came with a dry mouth and a feeling in the legs, like I had to move or I'd drown. I went to the kitchen and stood with my hips leaning on the counter and listened to the little clicks the fridge makes when it changes its mind. Through the window, the sodium of the streetlight made everything into a soft bruise. The mirror in the attic hung above me like a thought I didn't finish. On Friday, the advisory tightened. They made a map with colored blocks that looked like a game we weren't going to win. The far side of town had to stop using water altogether for 6 hours while they flushed. They told everyone not to use lawn sprinklers and not to fill pools and not to let children swallow bath water. We don't have a lawn anyone cares about, and we don't have a pool, and we not children. Still, the language of it crept. You start to wonder how much you are a body made of what moves through pipes. You start to feel the house as an organism with its own anxieties. Every faucet became a mouth. Every mouth wanted telling what to do. Kincaid sent me to the back with the case cutter to break down boxes because no one is thinking about paint when they were told their sink is broken. I liked the back when my head got noisy. The compressor kicked on and off with the honest rhythm of a thing with work. The cardboard gave under my hands. The blade slid and made a sound like soft ripping. It felt good to do a clean thing. When I finished, a stack of flats stood up like a small wall. Behind it, the metal shelf showed its dust in places I couldn't reach unless I wanted to be the person who cleans beyond what anyone will see. I stood there with the cutter in my hand and felt pointless and calmed at the same time. The scanner through the door beeped like a heartbeat you hear only when you're very still. The mirror waited. The book waited more eagerly. I think it wanted me to argue with it. I didn't say that out loud, because once you say a thing like that now, you're a person who says that, and that is a different kind of trap. Saturday morning came with a strange quiet. No mower orchestra from the neighbors. No leaf blowers doing their dust recital. The advisory had gotten into everyone's head, I guess, and made them cautious about stirring anything they couldn't wash off. I went out front and pulled 3 weeds on my knees and went back inside because the sun had a hard edge to it and the air felt used. Mom had moved the chair by the living room window to a place where the light didn't hit it, and the little circle an old chair had worn in the carpet looked like a crop mark. The book went from the top of the fridge to the table and then back to the fridge when I noticed it there as if it had crept down. I told myself I had moved it without thinking. I tried to remember the exact hand motion. I couldn't. Toward noon, I broke. It felt like anything would be better than waiting for the next paragraph of my life to be handed to me in my own handwriting. I went up to the attic and carried the mirror down. I told myself I was doing it for Mom, for bad luck reasons, to prove a point about superstition. That was a nice story. The truth was, I wanted to alter the geometry. I wanted to be the person who put something somewhere else and made the world respond accordingly. The mirror was heavier than it looked. The frame dug into my hands and put ornate patterns into my palms. I stopped twice on the stairs and breathed with my mouth open. At the bottom, I leaned it against the hall wall. The light there is always a little green in the afternoon from something in the glass of the front door. The mirror took the green and turned it into a tarnish around anything that moved. I stood in front of it and kept waiting to see the thing I had told myself I might see. And in that waiting did the thing itself. The man in the mirror moved when I moved. He did most of it at the same time and a little of it not. He lifted his left shoulder a second after I did, like he was catching up to the idea of me. When I held perfectly still, he did too. That should have made obedience into comfort. It didn't. I told myself I'd sleep with the mirror there, out in the light, and wake to it, and find it was only a thing you can dust. This was not my clever idea. It was a kid's idea dressed up. Still, I did it. I ate a bowl of cereal damp from boiled water, a shade too hot to be good with cereal. I watched the news. The news watched me back the way it does when your town is small enough that nothing is happening to anyone else, and your little trouble becomes the show. I left 3 lights on. I slept with my door open so I could see the slice of the mirror, thin as a bookmark, when I woke in the night. When I woke, it hurt. Not the waking. The way my joints had convinced themselves they were needed, and now announced it. I was going to get a glass of water. I stood and looked down the hall by instinct, because that is what you do when your head says something is not how it was. The mirror was where I left it. The green was less now. The hall light had burned out in the evening, and I hadn't replaced it. In the slice of dark, the mirror held my segment of a figure. I walked toward it the way you walk toward a dog that isn't sure about you. When I got there, I stopped, because he was already close enough to fog my view. His breath, the same pattern as mine, his chest on mine. his face on mine with a waiting that felt like an invitation to do a thing I didn't know the name of. I leaned left a fraction, the kind of lean you do when you want to joke with a friend without saying anything. He leaned left a fraction. My fraction had a tail on it. His didn't. I leaned right, and he leaned right, and my right had a lag I couldn't deny. I reached up and put my hand on the frame like you put your hand on a door you were not going to open. The wood was cold, which is stupid because wood takes the room temperature and the house was not cold. I wanted to know if I could leave my handprint there. I wanted to know if he would leave his. When I went to shave the next morning, I kept my eyes on the task. I don't look at myself when I shave because there's no reason to beyond accuracy. That day, I looked at my mouth and watched it move like it had learned this on a TV somewhere and was practicing. In the glass, I saw my shoulder. Behind my shoulder was my shoulder, because there aren't many choices there. Then, in the sliver that the medicine cabinet manages to make even though it's flush, a fraction behind my shoulder was something like me in the wrong register. His cheek tightened when mine didn't. His eye blinked when I didn't, a fraction ahead, like a metronome set a touch faster. I tell you this as if I were sure. I wasn't. The only thing I was sure of was that I began to make myself very still, not as a game, as a bargain. On Sunday, I took the book and sat on the back steps and opened it and told myself I would read it through. The whole thing, no cherry picking, no only tomorrows. When I opened it, so many pages were blank that I almost felt like I had some leverage. The handwriting went 10 days out and stopped hard, as if it had hit a wall that felt the same to the hand as paper, but didn't act paper-like. The last entry that existed said, "The mirror moves itself back to the attic." I laughed out loud with no joy in it. I said, "Go ahead," because that was the kind of person I wanted the mirror to think I was, a person with jokes where fear should be. I left it there and went inside. I drank the boiled water. I sat with Mom on the couch and watched a show where a couple picks out a house they can't afford. An hour later, I went to the hallway casually, because casually is the only way to know if you are a liar. The mirror was no longer there. This is where a different type of person would say they heard the stairs, they heard the weight, they felt the house shift. I heard none of that. The mirror had simply decided that the hall was not its address and the attic was. I went up, and there it was, leaning in its dent in the insulation like an animal back in its burrow. The place on the hall wall where it had leaned was not that dusty because I had dusted when I brought it down. Still, the outline of where it had been drew itself in my head like a shaped absence. I brought it down again. You can say here that this was the dumbest use of a back a man like me could make. I put it in the den. I angled it a little so it wouldn't catch the glare off the TV. I said, "There." I stood like I'd done something and thought about how sometimes moving an object does feel like you have forced time to admit it is real. That night, the den was empty of mirror. The attic was full of mirror. I sat on the last step and put my head in my hands like I'd seen men do when they were told something by a doctor. The attic had a smell now like metal rubbed once. I took the book out of my back pocket and thought about throwing it. I didn't. That was the point. It wasn't a point I liked. Monday, Kincaid handed me a note. "They're making us close early," he said, like it was a weather event he took personally. The strip mall wanted everyone dark by 7 while they switched something out. The notice didn't name it exactly. Something at the big box down the way had thrown a load across the grid. I didn't need the language to know the feeling. Everyone went home early with their projects only half imagined. At home, Mum had moved 3 bowls into a row on the counter and filled each with water, like she was making a choice among them and wanted time to do it right. I asked what the bowls were for. She looked at me like I'd asked the air its name. "For what we'll need," she said. I did not know how to make my face. I stacked on her bowls, another and then another, as if more bowls would strengthen the faith she was building into the counter. When it got dark, it got very dark. The power kept its promise and went out like someone had pinched it. The house breathed for the first time in a week. Every tiny motor stopped all at once and reminded you that stillness is another kind of noise. We lit 2 candles. Mom hated candles and always said they were accidents waiting to happen. I loved them in a way that embarrassed me. The thin light came with a smell that took me back to a church we visited once as a tourist, when Dad drove us to see a town with a ruined courthouse. The wax crept down the side in good, slow drips. In the dim, I could have been a better son, the kind who sits and asks questions and listens to answers. I sat and listened to the house. In the mirror, which was back in the attic again because it was where it wanted to be, a shadow had weight. I know how that sounds. But the candle set below it and the geometry uphill did something you could feel in your stomach. I kept my eyes on the candle. I felt the mirror on the top of my head like a fly that knows it has found warmth. When the power came back, it brought all its hums and clicks, and the house made its little clearing throat noise. And I went to bed and looked at the ceiling until it turned the lighter shade. That means morning is coming whether or not you want it. The next days, the book told me small cruelties. It told me about a passing remark I would make that would land wrong in a stranger. It told me I would bite the inside of my cheek and taste blood, and that it would be enough to make me sit at the end of the aisle until I had the taste of pennies gone. It described the fog that would ride up the river toward town one evening like a low fence, and said I would see someone standing in it to the left of Mrs. Hollis' mailbox, and that my foot would slow, even though I knew I should not slow at all. It said if I put the book in the trash, I would find it on the table the next morning under the mail, as if the mail was saying, here is your regular life, and here is also the other thing. It said Mom would leave the fan on in the bathroom, even though no one was in there. It said I would wake and turn it off, and then I would wake again and it would be on. I started thinking about calling someone with letters after his name and asking him to tell me about sleep. I didn't make the call because the day made itself out of habits, and those habits had an economy to them that didn't include consultations. On Thursday night, I thought I saw the man who isn't me in a bus window. This isn't where we have buses. They done a T run regular, and if you see one, you think of a school field trip or a church retreat, not public transit. This one went by early, one of those charters, the kind you rent for a team. It cut along Maple, and I was at the end of the driveway bringing the bin back in. In the second window from the back, a flat of glass that only cares about reflecting heat, there was my face, and behind my face, not behind, but a displacement. It is hard to say. Imagine a double exposure where you are slightly older or slightly younger, or simply wrong in your angles. The second face turned its mouth down in a way I had not. I froze. The brake lights ahead of it bled into the fog that had found us again, and the bus went and the window took me with it. This is where I should tell you I did something big and brave or big and stupid, and maybe I did, but it took the shape of a small thing. I took the book and the mirror and put them together. I carried the mirror down and set it on the dining table like a person and put the book on the chair across from it. I said, okay. I said it like a man does with a socket wrench in his hand when he has finally located the bolt that had been hiding behind a hose. Mom asked what I was doing, and I said, I'm working on something, and she nodded like that was a trade. I opened the book to the last written page. The handwriting wobbled, not much, enough. It said, I am writing this at the table. It said, the mirror shows me from a good angle, and then it shows me from after. The word after had a tremor in it. I put my palm on the paper and watched the mirror try to decide if it wanted to give me a left-faced person or a right. I moved my head. The man moved his. A fraction, a beat. Never enough to be a sayable difference if I needed to say it to someone else. More than enough to live on. I thought about the fact you could take a page out and burn it. I thought about the wrong satisfaction that would bring. I thought about the way heat takes the way paper has weight and makes it into a curl. I did not tear a page. Instead, I took a pen and I wrote, "Stop." My hand cramped a little because I'd been holding it too tight. The letters looked like letters a boy writes when he thinks block letters will save him, in the way numbers make men feel better when they can report them to each other. The book stayed a book. The mirror stayed a mirror. If the man on the other side smiled, it was a small one I might have imagined. That night, I dreamed in a way I haven't since a fever in 10th grade. The dream had no good plot. It was a hallway. Not my hallway. A public hallway, office carpet, scuffed baseboard, hand sanitizer dispenser with a half-dried dribble. At the end was a door with the thin window that reaches a person's face if he is standing close. The window showed not a room, but a continuation of the hallway. So if you looked long enough, you saw yourself in a little infinite reduction. I woke with my heart mad and my sheets damp and a cold under me, like the mattress had been left outside. The house held its breath, waiting to see if I would do something about the fan in the bathroom. I went and turned it off. The room sighed at me. The fan ticked as it slowed. Something tapped in the wall where the pipes changed direction. I stopped cooking. That is not a dramatic sentence if you have never lived where the routine matters bigger than what comes out at the end. The stove stayed clean. The pots stayed stacked. I took bread out and put it back. I ate crackers standing up. I chewed until my jaw hurt. Mom ate at the table with the place in the wood where Dad's coffee cup left a mark he would have loved to see, turned into a story by what was left of us. She did not comment. Sometimes I would stand in the hallway and watch her reflection in the dark TV. The reflection made her look younger and all the more tired for it. Kincaid asked if I wanted more hours. I said no. He said, "You got something going on?" I said, "We're fine." On my lunch break, I went to the aisle with the roofing tar and the tape measures and felt calm the way you feel calm in aisles that have specific uses. I ran my hand down a display of pry bars. The metal was cool and disinterested. I could have taken a bar home and done violence to the mirror. I could have broken the book's spine. I kept my hands in my pockets and listened to the store breathe. On Saturday, the next Saturday, not the first, I opened the book and found the pages beyond the last handwriting had begun to faintly show lines, as if the ghost of words were pressing through from the back. I held the page up to the light and tilted it. There were the shapes of curves and straight pieces, not letters enough to read. More like the hint that later there would be a letter. I wanted to throw up with disappointment at the idea that even the blankness had a Q in it now. The book said I would wait in my truck outside my sister's building and watch the lights in the windows go on and off like a code written by tired people. It said I would see myself in the rear view and that we would both look away. It said when I came home, the mirror would be on the landing but facing the wall, which is not the kind of thing house things do unless someone has told them a story about privacy and they have taken it too seriously. I walked into that exactly. The mirror was at the landing, nose to the paint. I had not put it there, which meant Mom had, and Mom doesn't touch things that are heavy if she doesn't have to. I turned the mirror around and leaned it for the carrying down. In it, my face came with more of Dad than it had last year. There's a hollowness under the cheekbone that shows when you are tired or when your genetics are making themselves known. I touched my cheek, my real cheek, and left a little bit of skin oil on the glass. The man behind my touch wiped at his cheek a hair late and a hair not where I touched. It was like watching an echo. That night, a thunderstorm did what a thunderstorm does and made everyone in town a little bit kinder the next morning because they had all woken with a sense of the same story. The river came up to its predictable line and made the grasses there bow. The hardware store sold 3 sump pumps and a boat of extension cords. Kincaid waved me off early, and I drove home slower than you should in a town where people like to go 10 above as a body language thing. In the kitchen, one of Mom's bowls had gone grey from a film on top, and I poured it out and felt like I had done a bad thing even though it had to be done. The advisory was still on. The newsman had a look on his face like he had been told not to be dramatic, and that order had made him worse at his job. The book's last page had filled in another line. It said, "When it is time, I will watch him put his hand where mine always goes." It did not say where that was. It did not say what time meant. It made my stomach go hollow and then complain at me like I was in the wrong for not filling it. I boiled water and poured it over coffee grounds and waited and then did not drink it because the smell went wrong in the last breath before the pour. It smelled like the garage in summer when you bring the mower in and shut the door. I did not go to the attic. That seems to be an action to you, and you would be right. Everything became not going to the attic. I went to the den. I went to the porch. I went to the driveway and looked down the street at the light over the crossing where the train only comes once a day. The light cycling felt like prayer. I counted it: green, yellow, red, far too long, back to green. The relay in the head of it clicked in a rhythm you couldn't hear from the road, but you could feel if you stood under it and put your head just right. I did that. Someone passing might have thought I was sick. I was not. I was making a different kind of bargain, one with machines who have no business caring about me. The day came. You can feel it when you are in a story and no one tells you that. It is not that the light is different or the air has that smell you remember from childhood storms. It is that your body begins to locate itself in the room with a discipline you did not ask for. You become an inventory of muscles and habits. I made toast and did not burn it because I watched the slider like it was a vein I had to pinch. I drank water that had been boiled and cooled, and the metallic taste of it went into every part of my mouth like it was telling the roof about itself. I put the book on the table and the mirror on the other chair. Mom looked at me. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She went to the den with her crossword. The pencil whispered. The fan on low made its money rattle. This is how it happened. I am trying to be plain the way you asked for plainness at the start, even if you didn't know you were asking. I put my hand on the mirror where the carved flowers rise like something growing out of a stump. The wood fit my palm because it had fit my father's and his. The man in the mirror did what I did in the way he does it, which is almost. I slid my hand down the frame to the bottom, where there is a piece joined with two dovetails, and the wood changes the way tone changes in speech when a person lies a little. I crouched to meet the lower piece and looked into my lower half because how mirrors make fools of us. The other man crouched. He leaned into his own lower half. For a blink, less, I saw his eyes where my chest would be. I know eyes, I know mine. They were not mine. The color was mine. The lid was mine. The attention was not. It was like meeting a person you know in a place where you do not know anyone and thinking you will both be saved by the relief. But then the person speaks and the voice is a pitch lower and everything drops out from under you. I reached out and put my hand on the glass because that is the thing you would do, don't lie. It was colder than room, not cold like outdoors in winter, not cold like metal, but cold like the underside of a rock you flip in the garden and find 1,000 little pale bodies making their lives there. My handprint stayed, his handprint did not. There was my palm, 5 fingers, the whirls you can see but you know are there because a policeman once told you everyone has them. On his side, his palm came to meet mine a breath later, pressed with no fog, made no sign of being a body heat. He smiled, a place my mouth didn't go. It was small. You could tell yourself it was a way his face rested when he was concentrating. He didn't move his shoulders the way you always move your shoulders when you smile, because the rest of your body retracts a little from the performance. His smile had no involvement in it beyond itself, as if a program had been run and came to the word smile and did it. He touched the place above his lip with his little finger, the way I do when I think about something and pretend I'm not thinking. I hadn't thought about that in 10 years. He hooked his finger there and made a tiny pat like he was checking that the old move still fit. I closed my eyes. I opened them. He was closer. Somewhere in the house, a light went out, the quiet kind. where the filament must have given up that last tiny bit of itself without the flourish of going bright first. The house didn't lose power. This was a local event. The mirror got darker a shade, just enough to make the boundaries of both of us a little more comfortable. I said, "Okay," again, which has always been my worst prayer. If this were a different kind of telling, this is where I'd say something cracked, and that would mean something had decided. Nothing cracked. The room stood. The mirror held. My hand against it found itself inches forward without the memory of muscles doing that. The cold at my palm took on the press of another palm, and I knew in the meat of my hand what it feels like when a hand exactly as big as yours meets it from the other side and is convinced pressure is a one-direction thing. I pushed. He pushed. It was stupid and holy at once, because we were two animals doing the one thing that animals do when they meet hard, clear boundaries. We tested. His face moved toward mine. The angle of it was wrong. The wrongness here is a geometry hard to describe. Think of the way a porch makes the corner of a house into a different kind of corner, larger and yet thinner, where sound behaves in a way your ears do not prefer. His face moved through that kind of space. I felt my own hair, a thing I do not think about, lift in the small static the room made. It is not sensationalism to say I could hear the blood in my neck. He stopped a half-inch from the glass. My hand, which believed in friction, slid. His didn't. My mother made a sound from the den, a small chair scrape, the pencil falling. It brought me back into the shape of the room. I turned my head toward the doorway. The man in the mirror did not turn his head. He kept looking at the place where my head had just been, like when a bird stares at a thing you cannot see, and you remember that their eye is not your eye. He lifted his hand from the glass slowly. He set his fingertip on the paper that lay on the table in the frame of the mirror. I could see it there, as if the table in his room was our table, and he wrote a line with no pen. The thread of it appeared like fog, catching a shape you didn't know was already there. He wrote in my hand. He wrote, "You will live here now." He set his hand back on the glass and left it, not leaving a print. There was a choice. I am not lying to make myself seem better than I am. I saw two ways this road bent. In one, I ran. I took the mirror. I took it into the yard. I made a spectacle of myself and called it a solution. And in the morning I would wake to find it where it wanted to be, and the spectacle would have fed something I did not wish to feed. In the other, I did not run. I did a small thing. I opened the book and put it between us and the mirror, so the glass held its blue, my blue, the lake color that looks warm and isn't. I put my palm on the cover. The cold came through the paper like the paper were a lung and I were the air. The book wrote. I did not move my hand. It did not move my hand, the book wrote. The letters appeared so slow it hurt to watch. My own meanness made me think of the way a snail moves and leaves a trail that is a blessing to some and a ruin to others. The line said, "He has agreed." I shook my head. I did not agree. Or did I, by putting my hand there where hands go when they sign? The little words made themselves. He knows better than to say it aloud. The mirror man leaned back from the glass a half-inch, enough to give me air. That's what it felt like, that he had given me something. He lifted his right hand. The muscles at the base of his thumb flinched in a way I know from when I carry something heavier than I want to admit. He lifted his right hand and lifted mine with it. I could feel my own hand rise, and I was not the one doing it, and in that there is no help I know how to ask for. He set our right hands level with our mouths. He pressed his palm to mine, and in the dead center of where palms are palms, the cold turned into a perfect absence of temperature. It turns out there is a moment where your skin decides it cannot report. It calls that a peace. Down the hall, Mum coughed, a short bark like she got a crumb wrong. He lowered our hands. He put his forehead to the glass the way children do when they look down from a high building and want to scare whoever is behind them. I did not put my forehead to the glass. My forehead was already there. I watched the little islands of old silvering at the corner shake with our breath, then still, then not shake again. The house held. The advisory on the counter yellowed with the grease of a day. The fan had made a groove in the air and kept it. The light over the sink hummed. Same pitch as always. Out front, the cycling light did its sequence. In my head, the hallway from the dream lengthened until it met the hallway in the house, and the two hallways thought about what it would mean to be one hallway. After it is quieter than you think. This is an afterward. It has not been a week, and it has been longer than any stretch of my life. Mom asks fewer questions. We eat soft things. Bread, bananas, something like soup. The book sits on the table under the mail like that's where mail goes. I do not open it, and it does not open me. When I catch sight of myself in a pain, I have to take a second and tilt to know if I am seeing me or my other, and then I have to decide whether it would be worse to always get that right or sometimes get it wrong. The mirror lives in the attic. It does not wander now. The mirror in the bathroom I cover with a towel when I'm too tired to carry on a conversation. The towel falls on its own if I forget to secure it. In the den, the TV turns itself onto a channel with no broadcast, and the snow there is the snow of childhood, not the nothing modern TVs give you. I watch it sometimes. It gives a person comfort to see familiar absence. Troy came by and knocked on the door, and I sat in the kitchen and did not go to the door and let him talk himself into thinking no one was home. He called my name, and what that name felt like in my mouth when I repeated it to myself did not match what it used to. When he left a white envelope under the mat with the rest of the money, or someone's money. It had sweat on the flap. I did not take it. Mom did. She put it in the top drawer where the warranty booklets go to die. I become careful around glass. The windows have a personality I do not want to be on the wrong side of. I have learned the route from kitchen to porch that uses doorways only. Outside, the pond in the corner of the neighbor S yard holds a green that pretends to be depth. I watch clouds cross it and try to see myself and cannot. And this is a relief I did not know a person could make for himself. At work, Kincaid told me if I wanted the key to open, he would think about it. And I looked at the key and felt nothing, and told him someone else had better vocabulary for weather. The jack does not bite my heel anymore, because I am no longer the man who walks down that aisle. I run the register and listen to the beep and let it talk me down from the edges I invent. A woman bought a mirror last Tuesday, and I made my face do exactly nothing. She told me she liked the carving. I told her I liked the straightforward quality of a clean rectangle. We laughed in the safe place between us and the thing. When I shave, some days he comes a fraction early, and some days I do. We take turns like that. It is not a court. There is no judge. There is only the discipline of doing a small thing so carefully that your body goes out of your hands and into another set of hands, and that set of hands looks like yours in the daytime when you pass a storefront and catch yourself. The book remains. It does not bind itself shut. If I wanted, I could write. I know this because my hand itches for the comfort of block letters. It wants to make a future into something you can point at instead of something that leaks into you through the fixtures and the habits and the towel drawer. I do not write. That is a kind of signing. In the middle of the night, which is no number, I stand in the kitchen with my hand on the cool of the counter. The light from the street comes in with its bruised quality. The refrigerator's little motor goes on and off. The fan in the bathroom does what it likes. The mirror up there holds me the way a mouth holds a word you plan to say but have decided to save. I am in here. He is in there. That is both true and maybe not. The difference between a story written and a story lived seems to be a quarter-inch of glass. The house breathes around it. I breathe to the count of the green light changing without counting, and in a way I have never been lonelier and never had company more exacting. The day starts and the day starts again. If you leaned a little to the left, you might see me in profile in the kitchen window, or not. If you leaned a little to the right, You might see him go on living. He is good at my work. He is neat with his hands. He pours the boiled water with patience. He does not burn the toast. He puts his palm where mine always went and waits there until the warmth becomes no temperature at all. I live where I live. We both do, maybe. The mirror will tell us if that's true. Or the book will write it. Or nothing will, and we will keep taking our turns at the sink until the light goes out very quietly and the house says nothing because there is nothing left to say. If this story lands with you, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who enjoys quiet, literary horror. Comments are open. Tell me your favorite image or line.